Committee meeting, we will make the utmost effort to follow through with negotiations on all submitted draft resolutions and decisions at each contact group in order to transfer a compilation of them to the United Nations Environment Assembly for its approval. Also, this meeting will offer Member States the opportunity to receive various updates on administrative and budgetary matters, 6th Global Environment Outlook, budget and program performance, as well as implementation of the resolutions adopted by the previous Assembly. Last but not least, a draft of the ministerial outcome document will be negotiated under the leadership and guidance of the President of the Assembly for adoption at the UN Environment Assembly. The meeting has an ambitious program, and therefore it requires us to use our time efficiently and effectively and to come up with innovative ways to conclude our work successfully within the limited time available. I am confident that I will be able to count on your full support and cooperation to ensure that we complete this challenging journey and accomplish our ambitious goals. Let me stop here and turn the floor over to the Executive Director, Mr. Eric Solheim, to make his welcoming remarks. Mr. Solheim, you have the floor, sir.
I suggest that those who are still standing take a seat, because it's easier when we start the discussion. Welcome. Okay, let me start by wishing everyone heartily welcome to this meeting in preparation of the Environment Assembly, which will start, as you all know, next week. Some of you have come from capitals, some of you are based here in Nairobi. I just see the new Brazilian ambassador. Very welcome. You're very experienced on environment, and for sure will be a huge asset coming here too for us to Nairobi. But there are many others also, so it's maybe unfair to single you out especially, but you're my old friend, so thank you so much for coming. Let me start by quoting one of the best politicians of any time, the Indian leader Mahatma Gandhi. He once said that the difference between what we humans actually do and what we are capable of doing will suffice to solve all human problems. And I think that's a very good observation of what happened in the world in the year 2017. On one hand, if we continue with business as usual, if we continue with what we do, we have huge problems. On the other hand, if we look into all the enormous opportunities and possibilities and all the good actions we have started doing, we are ready to solve the problems. Starting with what we do. We all know that we are destroying the biodiversity, that we are polluting the planet, that we are increasing the temperature, and we see Mother Earth fighting back. 2017 was a year of huge destructive cyclones in the Caribbean, in the southern part of the United States, in Texas and in Florida. It was the year of big floods in India, in Bangladesh, other parts of South Asia. It was the year of landslides in Sierra Leone. It was the year when back home in my nation, Norway, the Arctic was melting at an unprecedented speed, and we had temperatures in winter in Norwegian part of Arctic, which is completely unprecedented, many degrees higher than what has been normal. 2017 was also a year of big sand and dust storms in Iran and other parts of the Middle East. It was simply the year where Mother Earth decided to fight back. But fortunately, 2017 was a lot more than that. 2017 was the year when we put the Minamata Protocol into operation, when we had a fantastic meeting in Geneva. Minamata Protocol is now part of the global environment design, and we will start phasing out mercury, which has been one of the most destructive poisonous substances for humanity. 2017 was the year where the Kigali Protocol was adopted by humanity. 22 nations, the last one was Malawi, has now adopted the protocol, which means that by 1st January 2019, the Kigali Amendment to the Montreal Protocol will be accepted, which means that we will reduce the global warming by half a degree, and which also means that we have a fantastic platform for a global clean cooling alliance, which can take us even further steps towards this action. 2017 was also the year when all nations come together in Bonn. One nation, as we know, had decided to withdraw from the Paris Agreement, but every other nation on planet Earth decided that we will move forward. Even those few nations who were outside the Paris Agreement, like Nicaragua and Syria, has now joined it. So every nation except one is on board for the Paris Agreement, and even the huge amount of private sector and subnational entities in that one nation are in support of climate action. This year was also the year when we got 2 million pledges from individuals for our Fight Pollution or Ending Pollution pledge. It was the year when the United Kingdom and Canada launched a global alliance against coal. Not all nations have subscribed to that. Not all nations will do it immediately, but it sets a direction for humanity, because now for the first time in human history, the price of solar and wind is the same as the price of coal, so we can all move in the green direction. 2017 was the year when President Xi Jinping of China, in the 19th Party Congress of the Chinese Communist Party, set out an ecological civilization as the big aim for China, but more importantly for the entire world. He spoke about beautiful China, and he spoke at length at the environment. And of course, when that happens in the most populous nation on planet Earth, it's enormously significant for China, but also for the world. So I could give you any number of good news. Yes, Mother Earth is fighting back, but yes, humanity, we are also stepping up to the challenge. So this is the paradox of the world in 2017. It's exactly what Gandhi said. The difference between what we are doing and what we are capable of doing is the only issue we need to resolve. You are all aware, of course, of the Sustainable Development Goals. The world has a little bit difficulty with the Sustainable Development Goals because there are 17. No one can remember them all. I guess there may be 1 or 2 people in this room who can remember them all, but there are very, very few. But the good news is, of course, that all the 17 basically comes down to 2. People and planet. People, education, health, bringing everyone out of poverty. Planet, protecting the deserts, protecting the mountains, protecting the oceans, protecting all the ecosystems and the beauty of this fantastic planet. In order to really drive this agenda, we need to bring it together. That's one of the reasons why we decided to put pollution front and center at the UN Environment Assembly, because pollution is one of the areas where we can bring together so many of the Sustainable Development Goals into one forward-looking agenda. Pollution, of course, is about our health, health of humans. So yes, it's indeed about people, but it's for sure also about the planet. We are destroying our planet through pollution. Pollution is an enormous good way of engaging people on climate. Climate seems for some people quite distant, while pollution is here and now affecting our children today. It's driving environment home in a way we have not been successful doing with climate, so we bring these into one agenda. And it's also a way of focusing on the job creation, because there is any number of new jobs to be had in the new economies. By the way, there is already today more jobs in the renewable economies in China, as well as in the United States of America, than there are jobs in the fossil fuel sector. So if you want jobs, and every nation wants more jobs, every president, prime minister in the entire world wants jobs for his or her people, then environment is a way to do it. And as you know, I've been from the first day in the environment absolutely adamant that if we see environment as a kind of sideshow, something just for ministers of environment, something out there, we will fail. We need to drive environment home, to be front and center in people's consciousness, and we need to drive it home to make sure that it's part of one environment development agenda, one environment jobs agenda, and one agenda which is about people and planet at the same time. We will fail if environment is separate. We will succeed if we devise all the policies which can give us jobs and protect people and bring better health and protect the environment at the same time. We have launched a policy statement which should be out on the website now. Jorge, you can check if it's already there. So please look into that. And of course, one facet of that is exactly this, how to bring the different points together into one agenda. Last week, we were celebrating the Montreal Protocol at the 30th anniversary of that protocol in, obviously, Montreal, Canada. I will claim that the Montreal Protocol is probably the most successful agreement of humanity at any time. Not just on environment, on trade, peace, disarmament, development. Well, this is the one protocol which every nation on planet Earth has embraced. This is the one protocol where every dollar or yuan or euro which has been promised has been delivered. And this is the one protocol where we already see the results. The ozone layer, according to scientists, arc is coming back in the same shape as it was before we started destroying it. So it's a fantastic success story. And then it, of course, teaches us something about the method for success. And in my view, there were three main elements in that success story. Number one, scientists and citizens did speak out. Some US and Mexican scientists were the first to really detect the problem up there. At the time, very few people believed in it. Then they mobilized other scientists into understanding it. Then media came on board. Then citizens started engaging, non-governmental organizations. I mean, it was a citizens' movement saying, we need to change. I don't want my children to live up in a world where we can have any number of new skin cancer cases or where we destroy our households by exceeding radiation. Secondly, we needed political leadership. Interestingly enough, at that time, that political leadership was fairly conservative. It was Margaret Thatcher of the United Kingdom, it was Ronald Reagan of the United States, and it was the conservative Canadian Prime Minister Mulroney who did drive the agenda, of course, with many others in the world. But these were leaders stepping up to the challenge, setting aside ideology, really to serve humanity. And we should look into how we can be inspired by that sort of leadership. So citizens, political leaders, and then thirdly business. It was business who did find all the replacement articles, all the replacement gases we needed to be able to phase out the dangerous ozone-destroying gases. So that's, of course, when I speak about this, it's because this should lead us into the future. That's the aim of this Environment Assembly, to bring together political leaders as the most important, business leaders to drive the change, to innovate, to make the products we need, and to bring citizens on board to put pressure on all of us for acting more determinedly. If we look into all these three elements, starting with governments, we want to discuss here what are the right government policies if you want to once and for all phase out one-use plastic, which we do not need, which is of course very different from the plastic we do need. Remind yourself that when Bertrand Piccard did his circular move around the world in a solar plane, it was basically made by plastic. Because plastic was the one material so light and so insulating that it could keep him warm and light at the same time. So obviously we need plastic for solar panels, moon rockets, for many other areas, but we do not need the one-use plastic which we throw into nature and the oceans. And we want to be inspired by those nations who now act. There's so many of them. Kenya, of course, obviously being one. Rwanda being another one. France and the United Kingdom has just discussed different ways of reducing plastic. We can go around, basically around the world to see inspiring examples. But we want to discuss what works, what do not work. Exactly the same with air pollution. Many nations are taking determined actions. China is really clamping down on pollution in the big cities under the instruction from President Xi and other leaders. And we will look into how is that, can that be amended, how can that technology, how can that knowledge be used by other nations, but of course many other nations doing the same. How can we decouple pollution from economic growth? Some people say it's not possible. I tell you, it's not only possible, it's happening basically everywhere. I can take my own nation as an example. Norway has more than doubled its GDP since the 1990s. At the same time, every pollutant except the climate emissions have been drastically reduced. So we have an enormous economic growth and an enormous reduction in pollution at the same time. And we see the results. In all the rivers of southern Norway, which for 100 years there was no salmon there because of the Industrial Revolution, salmon is now coming back. Please come and fish. Not just thanks to us, but thanks to the Germans, to the French, to the Brits, and all the others who did pollute our rivers. We have decoupled economic growth from pollution, and that's, of course, what we need to do on the entire planet. And we know it can happen. Not even it can happen. Those nations who have done it have also made it a huge job opportunity, providing new technologies which they sell to other nations. So let's do that, make this decoupling. That should be an aim and a direction from this meeting. But without leadership, we will not change, and we see that leadership coming in India, in the European Union, in China, and many African and Latin American nations, and we need to embrace that leadership and discuss how we take it forward. Secondly, we need business. When I came into UN Environment and the UN system at large, I took it as one of my absolute priorities to change the way we work with business. This is not to say that all businesses are doing well. I mean, obviously, we can find bad apples within business. I mean, it's very clear. As we can find bad apples in civil society and even among even governments who do bad things. But overall, business is a force for good. Overall, we need the innovation, the technology, the drive, the scale. Without that, we can never succeed. And the more we can turn environment problems into business opportunities, the more likely they are to succeed. I'm very proud to see that the direction is shifting from a United Nations, which historically was fairly skeptical to business, into a United Nations, which is embracing business, working with business, but of course particularly working with those businesses who want to change, and those businesses are in the forefront of the revolution. Without the solar industry and the wind industry, of course, we would never have been in the position that solar and wind can now compete with coal everywhere in the world on new investments. Outside this room, you will see 100 bikes. Those are coming from Mobike, one of the Chinese companies doing bike sharing. Please take a look. Please go on a ride. You're allowed to take them outside. If you want to go back to your hotel, please use these Mobikes. And this is a private sector solution. The city government of Beijing or Shanghai has given zero economic support to this. It's business. Business providing the bikes, but so many people are using them that the price comes down to 10 cents per ride, which of course people can afford to do. It's simply to make a business solution at scale to a problem which is which is how to move around in cities. Adding to that, we want to work with all those companies. I mean, every car company in the world is now going into to electrical mobility. I mean, very recently, both Ford and General Motors set up big programs. Tesla last week said that they will now be able to make cars which can go 1,000 kilometers per charge, which is, of course, a revolution. In China, you have Build Your Dreams, the biggest producer of electrical buses in the world and electrical vehicles in the world. So a lot is happening. But it's government regulations which will decide how fast this revolution happens. Companies will make the technology, but governments will decide the speed of the transformation. So that's why we need both the companies as well as the governments. In our work on plastics, we have made a lot of partners. One is Volvo Ocean Race, which set out the need to change our habits on plastics to the sailor community in the world. Another is Sky News. Well, Sky News is owned by Mr. Murdoch. If I ask you for a vote, I think environment may not be the first word you would think of when you thought of Mr. Murdoch. But Sky News has really helped us in setting out the need to change from plastic to the populations in Europe. And Sky News itself is changing the business model when you get into their headquarters in London. First, you will say it's a huge cafeteria, which is the cafeteria of the staff, called Ocean Rescue. And you will see any number of installations showing the staff and visitors the need to change on plastics. So these are the partnerships we need with Volvo Ocean Race, with Sky News, and with so many other actors. We are partnered with the German company Covestro in our Young Champions of the Earth program. We are accompanying with big companies in Africa like Safaricom, like Kenya Airways, hopefully very soon with Ethiopian Airlines. And we really need to set up these partnerships all over the planet. But of course, the main idea is to partner with those who drive the change into the green future we all need. There is some reluctance to this in some civil society groups. I think we should speak to the civil society and explain why we work with business. But frankly, I don't think we should give in to the view that business is bad. Civil society is everything from the worst to the best. Civil society is those driving the green change. But civil society, frankly, is also those groups supporting the ISIS terrorism in Europe, those groups propagating for wars in many parts of the world. So civil society is everything from the worst to the best. So is business. What we want to do is to engage with the most positive business in driving the change. Finally, citizens, we need to bring the environment issues home. We need to bring it to the kitchen table, whether that kitchen table is in Chennai, India, or in Kansas City, United States of America, or in Buenos Aires. We need to make sure that people discuss environment issues at home with the families. Otherwise, we will not come anyway, because we need that drive from citizens. Then we need a language citizens can understand. That's why we have been adamant to wipe out acronyms to make our communication much simpler. And thank you for supporting that. Let's find ways of finding compromises on exactly how it should be done. But we need to have a language people can understand. Secretary General Guterres is in the forefront of that revolution, and the UN need to change. We also need, by the way, to change into a more emotional language, a simpler language which can engage with each and everyone. We need to defend those activists who are in the forefront of fighting for the environment. That's why we have now set out a UN environment strategy for defense of the environment defenders. When environment activists are killed, as in some cases, or harassed, we will be in the forefront of defending them, particularly in the way that we will demand from governments in those nations where this happens, that they put together a proper investigation and make sure that the culprits, those who are behind the attacks on the murder of environment activists, that they make sure that this is properly investigated and brought to court. That's the best defense people can get. But there are also many other ways of defending the defenders. And let me give a sunshine story from last week in India. Afroz Shah, who was one of the greatest environmentalists, he was the head of this fantastic beach cleanup in Mumbai. Then there were some hooligans and some goons harassing them, and he decided to stop this beach cleanup. Very bad news. But then came the good news, which was that the government of India immediately acted. He was called to Delhi to meet with the Indian Minister of urban issues. I mean, some of you may know him because he was the Indian ambassador to the UN in the past, who put the Indian government behind his efforts. The city mayor of Mumbai met him. State governor of the state of Maharashtra met him. So the Indian government came behind this citizens' engagement to make sure that no hooligans, no goons are allowed to attack people who really want to make society richer and better. That's exactly what we need, this relationship, government, business, and citizens. But we will do our best to give protection to those who do protect the environment. Finally, let me mention that we also want to see how we can be more effective in areas of wars and conflict. We have aligned ourselves particularly with the government of Somalia, the government of Iraq, and the government of Colombia in how we can bring the environment dimension into conflict resolution in their nations and make sure that enormous destruction, like in Iraq, where ISIS, this horrible terrorist movement, put fire to oil wells, released chemicals into nature, really fought the people of Iraq, and by the way also the people of Syria, fought them with environment as a tool, as a weapon. We need to assist them in rectifying this. There's a donors conference for Iraq in Kuwait in January. We'll try to be present there to see how we can really work with the government of Iraq in the enormous effort to clear all the debris from big cities like Ramadi and Mosul, which is parts of them completely destroyed and destroyed in an environment damaging way. So we want to set out the issue of environment security. With your support, we will of course always do it with government, not against governments. So finally, to sum up, I think again the great sage Mahatma Gandhi got it right. On one hand, we are doing a lot of harm to Mother Earth, to our planet. On the other hand, our abilities to resolve these problems have never been better. The governments of the world work together. If we mobilize citizens, if we mobilize the forces of the market and private sector, there is no limit to the issues we can resolve. So this paradox is at the core of the meeting next week. Let's describe the problems, but let's mainly focus on the solutions. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Eric. This was most enlightening and I think has set us off to a good start. I now open the floor for statements by regional and political groups and interested delegations. For effective time management, you are encouraged to limit your statements to a maximum of 4 minutes for regional and political groups and 2 for individual delegations. Please share the longer written versions with the Secretariat for posting on the committee portal. The floor is open. Colombia, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. Colombia wishes to speak on behalf of the group of Latin American countries and Caribbean countries. Mr. President of the UN Assembly for the Environment, Mr. Minister, Mr. Gutiérrez, President of the Committee of Permanent Representatives, Ambassador, Mr. Rasa from Pakistan, the Deputy, Mr. Moretti, Mr. Commissioner, Executive Director, Eric Salame, Ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen, representatives, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, to all. Allow me at the outset to convey my gratitude to the Executive Director for his statement and address. We'd also like to convey our gratitude to the President of the United Nations Assembly for the Environment. We'd like to thank all those who have represented the group of Latin American and Caribbean states for their effectiveness and efficiency. We especially welcome the fact that pollution was chosen as the core topic for this assembly. We believe that it is of fundamental importance to fight against pollution in all its forms and manifestations to ensure that we finally are able to achieve a pollution-free planet. We'd like to thank you for the resources we have obtained to finance a great many projects in developing states. We thank you for having assisted in the sending of delegates to this assembly. And of course, we cherish the hope that our debates will be crowned with success. We want to remind you what our position is regarding the fact that there's a need to guarantee two parallel sessions, the convening of two parallel sessions, aware of the fact that a great many delegations are small ones with very few members. And the members of GRULAG attach a great deal of importance to this meeting. We believe that this meeting should enable us to strengthen dialogue mechanisms between regions and UNEP. We need to strike a balance between the protection of the environment and socio-economic development of states. And it is a result of these types of assemblies that we will be able to do just that. We also welcome the adoption by the General Assembly of the United Nations of the Sustainable Development Program, the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda. This is a good starting point for our discussions. As part of this agenda, this program, we have a great many universal objectives. And of course, we're going to have to strive to achieve these objectives by giving pride of place to the sacrosanct ideals of countries such as the eradication of poverty, the fight against disease, the promotion of sustainable development, taking into account, of course, the sovereignty of states over their natural resources.
The 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda will be the guide for us, in particular in terms of the implementation of environmental aspects within the context of a strategy as a whole, with a comprehensive, coherent whole in balance with its objectives and goals. Therefore, we believe that it is essential that the resolutions which we hope to adopt within the third UNEA will fully comply with the mandate of UNEP and reflect a balance of the three aspects of sustainable development and duly take into account the various focal points, visions, models and instruments of countries in order to achieve this development based on their own national circumstances and priorities. Chair, with regards to draft resolutions, GRULAG has noted with concern the growing number of proposals taking into account the transitional nature of this assembly. There were no provisions of making effective use of time during the intersessional period in order to move forwards in our negotiations. Therefore, we insist upon the fact that we need a condensed group of resolutions which should be analysed in light of budgetary implications for UNEP as a whole. In addition, we call for the integration of resolutions with similar content in order to facilitate the organisation of our discussions and in order to contribute to a successful UNEA and committee. We have taken note of the documents drafted by the Chair of UNEP with regards to updating the Ministerial Declaration for UNEA 3. This will be subject to debate during the coming days. GRULAC would like to thank all those that have made contributions, and we will duly work on this topic. We hope that everything presented by delegations will be taken into account. Finally, the members of GRULAC would like to reiterate their support to the Bureau of UNEP and the Bureau of the Committee of Permanent Representatives. We want to ensure that preparatory work for UNEA 3 will be successful. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Colombia. I now give the floor to Malawi, speaking on behalf of the African Group.
The Executive Director, Chair of the Committee of Permanent Representatives, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the Africa Group. Mr. Chairman, let me take this opportunity to appreciate the Bureau of the Committee of Permanent Representatives under your leadership for the tremendous work undertaken during the intersessional period in the preparations of the open-ended CPR 3 and UNEA 3. This is clearly demonstrated by the reports that we have received thus far and the tremendous work done on the draft resolutions before us. While much of the groundwork has been covered, we recognize that there still remains a lot ahead of us in the coming days, particularly in relation to concluding the draft decisions, resolutions, and outcome documents for consideration and adoption by our ministers at UNEA 3. I therefore wish to express the commitment of the Africa Group to support you and your team in order to ensure successful deliberations in the OECPR 3 and UNEA 3. Mr. Chairman, at this juncture, allow me to acknowledge major international conferences related to the environmental agenda, which took place prior to this assembly, as we believe that their outcomes are relevant to UNEA 3. These include the outcomes of the Oceans Conference held in June 2017, the 13th COP to the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification, the 23rd COP to the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, the Kigali Amendment to the Montreal Protocol on substances that deplete the ozone layer, the 13th Joint COP to the Basel Convention on the control of transboundary movement of hazardous waste and disposal, the Rotterdam Convention on the prior informed consent procedure for certain hazardous chemicals and pesticides in international trade, and the Stockholm Convention on persistent organic pollutants. We believe that some elements from the outcomes of these conferences are important and can help us make informed decisions at this assembly and avoid duplication. Mr. Chairman, the Africa Group welcomes with appreciation the comprehensive report of the Executive Director, which clearly states his vision and areas of focus. We wish to express our profound commitment to support him in effectively executing his mandate as the Executive Director of UNEP. In this regard, the Africa Group wishes to recall the role of the Committee of Permanent Representatives as one of the governing bodies of UNEP. The role of CPR is to ensure as much as possible that member states are involved and have ownership of the work, decisions, and reforms of UNEP. The group, therefore, stands ready to meaningful, open, and transparent engagement with the Executive Director on issues related to the improvement of UNEP. Mr. Chairman, on the theme of UNEA 3, which is towards a pollution-free planet, we wish to indicate that the Africa Group actively participated in the negotiations and its endorsement. It is abundantly clear that pollution will undermine the realization of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and related Sustainable Development Goals, as well as Africa's Agenda 2063, if we continue to do business as usual. The enormous challenges that face our environment and consequently threaten human health and the well-being of ecosystems cannot be overemphasized. We therefore welcome the related report of the Executive Director, which draws our attention to the various forms of pollution and, most importantly, the prevailing challenges and gaps and possible solutions. Mr. Chairman, as we come up with solutions to curb pollution, we should bear in mind its direct linkages to the effective implementation and the achievement of the SDGs. In this regard, as we outline in the future we want, we wish to emphasize that poverty eradication is the greatest global challenge of our time and an indispensable requirement for sustainable development. Therefore, solutions that do not support poverty eradication cannot power the much-needed transformation required by the people of Africa for the sustainable development of our continent. The African Ministers of Environment held the 16th Ordinary Session of ANSEM in Libreville, Gabon, in June 2017, under the theme, Investing in Innovative Environmental Solutions to Accelerate Implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals and Agenda 2063 in Africa, and as such, called for solutions to pollution that are development-oriented and that lead to poverty eradication and creation of jobs and wealth in Africa. It is against this background that the African Group has tabled a number of draft resolutions with the overarching goal of highlighting concerns and proposing meaningful ways to effectively curb pollution and its negative impact on socio-economic progress of countries. We further wish to underscore that implementation of all resolutions to be adopted require effective means of implementation, which include capacity building at all levels, financial support, transfer of technology and development, and technical support. The Africa Group views South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation as necessary in addressing the challenges of pollution and other challenges related to sustainable development. It is in this regard that we welcome efforts that will lead to the adoption of a resolution on South-South cooperation and the proposed establishment of the China-Africa Environment Cooperation Center in collaboration with UNEP. We further wish to underline the necessity of implementing the resolutions to be adopted in line with the spirit of the 2015 Addis Ababa Action Agenda. Mr. Chairman, the Africa Group reaffirms its position on the importance of our outcome document in the form of a concise political declaration negotiated by the member states and adopted by consensus and based on the current theme. We believe that a negotiated outcome document provides the ministers with an opportunity to express themselves authoritatively in influencing the global environment agenda. We therefore remain ready to effectively engage in the negotiations during the open-ended CPR. Mr. Chairman, we remain concerned over unbalanced implementation of the decisions of the former UNEP Governing Council and the resolutions of the United Nations Environment Assembly. We have observed that this selective implementation is particularly skewed against many of the decisions and resolutions which affect our region. We therefore urge the Executive Director to, as much as possible, facilitate funding for implementation of the decisions and resolutions in a balanced manner, and to further ensure balanced reporting by UNEP in the implementation of all decisions and resolutions. Mr. Chairman, the Africa Group will continue to engage the Executive Director of UNEP on strengthening UNEP regional presence in Africa and on the consolidation of headquarters functions in accordance with paragraph 88 of Future We Want. Rather, paragraph 88 of the Future We Want. We believe such strengthening will duly promote an effective and efficient delivery of UNEP mandate. Finally, Mr. Chairman, I wish to once again express our unequivocal support towards cooperating with member states, regional groupings, and your team in ensuring a successful open-ended CPR3. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Malawi. I see no requests no further requests from regional groups. So I would now give the floor to the European Union. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much. I have indeed the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the European Union and its member states, with both Serbia and Ukraine aligning themselves with the statement. We would like to express our appreciation to the Executive Director, Mr. Eric Solheim, to the Secretariat of the UN Environment Programme, the Bureau of the Committee of Permanent Representatives, and to the UNEA Bureau for their hard work in preparing this meeting. We also truly appreciate the process led by Minister Gutierrez, the President of UNEA, involving transparent and inclusive consultations on a final draft of the ministerial declaration, which we want our ministers to adopt next week. The EU and its member states are looking forward to productive discussions amongst all member states at this OECPR meeting. We trust that our common aim is to reach good and meaningful results by Friday on the ministerial outcome document, draft resolutions and decisions, and all other relevant documents to be presented to the UNEA 3 for adoption. During the following 3 days of negotiation, we should keep in mind that our goal is to prepare a UNEA which sends a clear and strong signal to the broader public that member states are committed to proactively address pollution in all its dimensions. Mr. Chair, the third session of the Assembly will convene under the overarching theme towards a pollution-free planet, with the aim of putting forward ambitious, effective and collaborative action towards preventing and reducing pollution. It is our responsibility to make the best and most constructive use of the meeting this week in order to provide the Assembly with meaningful and actionable input for its consideration that meets this forward-looking theme. We welcome the Executive Director's background report, which helped formulate our proposals for resolutions and will inspire the leadership discussions during UNEA. We are faced with many persistent and even growing pollution challenges, and this trend needs to be turned. We recognize the utmost importance of concerted and ambitious action and wide international mobilization to tackle pollution, considering that pollution affects water and food security, economic development, social justice, and human health. We explicitly emphasize the strong interlinkages between environment and health and the importance to address them jointly, and in doing so, implementing the 2030 Agenda on Sustainable Development. In this context, we also welcome the report of the Lancet Commission on Pollution and Health, which provides valuable information about the burden that pollution places on health and economic development. We have submitted a proposal for a resolution on this matter, which we hope will be supported by all, given its importance for people and environment worldwide. A pollution-free planet cannot be achieved without active participation of all relevant stakeholders. Also, in the context of pollution, we see that the SDGs provide an overarching global framework agreed by all UN member states, and thus an opportunity for all actors to aim at and take action collaboratively towards the common targets. We need all actors, governments, academia, science, industry, and civil society alike, to boost the efforts needed for its implementation. Our priority for this week would be to reach a common understanding and agree on a set of resolutions and encourage actions needed to address pollution by all relevant stakeholders. With the necessary constructive spirit and political will, we are confident that a final agreement can be achieved and pave the way for a successful UNEA 3 next week. Mr. Chair, the European Union and its member states will collaborate in a positive spirit and build on the progress made so far to foster meaningful consensus. I thank you very much.
Thank you, European Union. In the absence of request for the floor from any regional or political group, I now give the floor to Kenya.
Hello.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Kenya welcomes you all to Nairobi to this open-ended meeting of the Committee of Permanent Representatives. We are very happy to be hosting this meeting, especially immediately after the end of our elective season, which ended yesterday. We also thank you all for the support that you gave us during that extended period. We welcome the remarks made by the Executive Director while opening this session, and we also thank the Bureau and the Secretariat for all the preparations for this meeting. We also align ourselves with the statement made by the African Group just before we read this statement. My delegation welcomes the initiatives to integrate the various resolutions and to reduce them into a number that we can work with in this meeting. We also welcome the efforts to iron out any contentious issues that may have derailed us in our discussions. On the outcome document, Kenya would like to see a negotiated document, and our delegation will work with all other delegations to make sure to this end. Chair, I thank you, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Kenya, for a very succinct statement. And when I say that we congratulate the people of Kenya for a very successful conclusion of the election process, and I had the honor to be present at both the ceremonies, and they were most impressive as always. Thank you very much. Mexico, you have the floor.
Señor Presidente del Comité.
Thank you, Chair. Committee of Permanent Representatives. Mr. Eric Solheim, Executive Director of UNEP. Distinguished delegates, permanent representatives, ladies and gentlemen. First and foremost, my delegation would like to reiterate that set out by Colombia on behalf of GRULAC. The region of Latin America and the Caribbean has taken part in the preparatory process for UNEA 3. We did so with great commitment, and we hope for a successful outcome with the ministerial declaration and resolutions. I would like to commend the work and dedication of the Bureau of the CPR and the presidency of UNEA for preparing this assembly, which will begin in less than a week. Chair, we have seen progress in various areas, but much still remains to be done in terms of decisions and agreements amongst membership. Some resolutions have received preliminary comments, and we still have much drafting to do. It's unfortunate that there have been delays, and we've not taken the most of the time available to us in order to negotiate ministerial declaration and resolutions. This would have allowed our delegations to concentrate ourselves fully on agreeing on issues which remain pending or contentious issues within resolutions, or focus on the substance of UNEA 3. The non-negotiation of texts runs counter to what is best practice within the United Nations. Chair, Mexico has proposed 2 resolutions, one on mainstreaming biodiversity in combating pollution, and another on the effective link between the Assembly of UNEP with the High-Level Forum on Sustainable Development. Both are central topics in the environmental sphere, and the Mexican government assigns great priority to them. We hope to receive the valuable contributions of all delegations on this in order to further strengthen these proposals. Chair, I would like to conclude by asking for all documents emerging from this meeting to be translated as soon as possible into all official languages of the United Nations, so that all capitals from countries represented here are able to approve these in a timely manner before their adoption at UNEA 3. Mexico reiterates its commitment to continue working along with other member states in order to ensure a fruitful and successful process leading up to UNEA. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Mexico. I now give the floor to Argentina. Gracias.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, delegates, Executive Director, Deputy Executive Director, good morning. First and foremost, my delegation would like to support that said by the distinguished representative of Colombia on behalf of GRULAC. Chair, In this OECPR, we are preparing for UNEA 3. The Argentine delegation is ready to work actively to ensure that UNEA 3 and its ministerial outcome document, as well as its resolutions, all are a great success. Sustainable development is achieved based on an equation whose balance is defined by each state. This includes environmental aspects, social aspects, and economic aspects, which needs to be taken into account, and these are all interdependent. Each state needs to take into account the specific needs, priorities, and capacities of each country and various levels of development of these countries. Therefore, Chair, we need to also take into account the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities. This principle needs to remain at the forefront of our minds in a very clear and explicit manner, and also needs to come out in our ministerial outcome document. Chair, we are ready to negotiate the outcome document in terms of its format, its language and content. We need a short, concise and targeted outcome document. My delegation would also like to highlight the importance of cooperation in all its forms. Chair, delegates, UNEP is a UN program. It is an intergovernmental program. Therefore, we, the member states, are those who will dictate the path to be followed by the program. There is no other path to follow. Therefore, and with regards to the intention of the Secretariat, who wants to refer to UNEP as UN Environment, we cannot support this. My country believes that this goes beyond just the communications focus of the Secretariat. Therefore, we recommend that the Secretariat no longer use UN Environment until member states decide that this is the course of action to be followed. Chair, delegates, that being said, I would like to conclude by once again reiterating the commitment of my delegation to the success of UNEA 3. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Argentina. And I would now like to close the list of speakers with the League of Arab States, to be followed by the Women's Major Group. League of Arab States, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. President. سيد الرئيس، اسمحوا لي في البداية أن أتقدم لكم جميعا باسم المجموعة العربية.
Thank you so much. I would like
والتقدير.
Speak on behalf of the Arab group. We'd like to convey a heartfelt congratulations to you and cherish the hope that our conference will be crowned with success, leading to positive results which will strengthen the efforts which we have undertaken so far to fight against pollution. Chairman, we have deployed immense efforts to convene this meeting. This meeting is one which is very important, especially in today's conditions. Today, where we see the negative impact of climate change throughout the world, including, of course, in the Arab region which is experiencing very serious pollution, sometimes as a result of armed conflicts, and sometimes for other reasons. And this will have a very serious impact on socio-economic development in our region as a whole. Based on this, I call upon all states to work in a coordinated, cohesive way to fight against pollution and to stem its negative impact in all countries, including in our Arab region. Sir, aware as we are of these dangers, the Arab group has also presented a resolution. A resolution within the framework of the idea of creating a pollution-free planet. And I'd also like to point out, sir, and pay tribute to the efforts which have been made by the Executive Director aimed at achieving an outcome document which is agreeable to all. And he has done this as a result of his constant contacts with member states. We cherish the hope that this document, this declaration, will be adopted and that it will be a text which will meet the needs of all states. We wish to see fruitful negotiations here within UNEA, and we cherish the hope, as I've said, that these efforts will lead to resolutions which will enable us to reach agreement which will bolster efforts to fight against pollutions and related dangers to economic development. So by way of conclusion, I would like to, on behalf of the Arab Group, reiterate that we will continue to back the efforts made within the General Assembly of the United Nations and UNEP aimed at achieving the objectives in this context. Thank you.
Thank you, League of Arab States. And we now have the last intervention by the Women's Major Group.
Thank you. I am Helen Hakena, speaking for the Women's Major Group. I am from Bougainville, an island and an autonomous region of Papua New Guinea. We are a matrilineal culture, meaning our land is inherited through women, but that doesn't mean women govern. Men remain as chiefs and decision makers. For women, our land is vital. Together with our oceans, land provides us with almost all the food and resources we depend on. It is central to our cultural and community life. Our island is fertile, and we have lived here for generations in harmony with the environment. Yet, we have faced many challenges that impact particularly on women and girls. Bougainville suffered a 20-year war when one of the world's largest open-pit mines, Panguna, destroyed our rivers, our land and environment, and destroyed our communities. I myself, leading my organization, Leitana Nehan Women's Development Agency, helped broker the peace and provided counseling to deal with the trauma our people suffered from the war. Till today, we provide support to domestic violence survivors in a community that was torn apart by a war that was triggered by corporations' greed for profit. It is wrongful and misleading to suggest civil society organizations such as ours could in any way be the same as terrorist organizations, as the Executive Director has just alleged. Unlike corporations that are rich and powerful with the ill-gotten gains from the mines, our strength comes from people's movements, and it is an insult to the solidarity of our communities. Our indigenous peoples and those who suffer the worst effect of profit-driven practices that has polluted our lands and waters. Many of us who are accredited to the UN system are fighting for people's rights and planetary health. In Bougainville, mines and logging produce hundreds of millions of dollars in profit. Our island did not become prosperous. Less than 1% of the profits of the mine went to local communities. The mine polluted our water and redirected our economy to servicing the mine and the foreign owners. Even now, much of the population is exposed to mercury used by artisanal miners, including pregnant women, to access the gold, and we have a high rate of birth complications and deformities as a result. The effects of pollution will outlive us. That is why UNIA 3 must not lose focus on reforming production systems that have harmful pollutive substances and practices. This requires the dismantling of neoliberal policies that privilege a small handful of global private companies. These companies have too long been able to wreak havoc on the well-being of our planet and our people, with almost no transparency and accountability. We envision more accountable and responsive state systems that make polluters pay and push the agenda towards sustainable consumption and production. A pollution-free world also requires just and lasting peace across the globe, as wars and conflict increase pollution of land, air, and water through war machinery. I know that it will take brave governments to hold corporations accountable, protect our rivers, our land from pollution. But it is possible. We have the wealth and we have the will to save our beautiful planet. Thank you.
Thank you. I now would like to turn your attention to the provisional agenda for the meeting, which was set out in UNEP/OECPR.3/1. Are there any comments on the provisional agenda? I see none. So I propose that we adopt the agenda. I hear no objection. The agenda is adopted. Thank you. Now, regarding adoption of the minutes of the 140th meeting of the Committee of Permanent Representatives, I understand delegations have not had much chance to sort of assimilate it since it was posted quite recently. So we defer its adoption to the next plenary, which is on Friday, the 1st of December 2017. Any objections? Okay. In that case, we move on to the organization of work. And in keeping with our agreement, I wish to propose the establishment of Contact Group 3, which shall consider the following resolutions and will meet now in room 3 and 4. But this will meet in 4, not 3 and 4.
It's together.
Okay. Combined 3 and 4. Her Excellency Ms. Taja Fernandez will facilitate negotiations of the Contact Group 3 for the following draft resolutions. Pollution prevention and control. This is number 17. Pollution prevention and control in areas affected by terrorist operations and armed conflicts. Number 18. Preventing and reducing air pollution to improve air quality globally. Negotiations for this group begin, they are already afoot. I mean, technically, it was to be from 10 to 12:30 and resume tomorrow from 2 to 6 p.m. in the conference room 3 and 4. Let us hope that negotiations in this group can be finalized on 1st of December 2017 at 10:30 a.m.
No objection.
Any objection to this? I see none. In that case, we move ahead. Okay. I believe that you've had the opportunity to review the organization of work for this meeting, as well as a table of allocation of draft resolutions to each contact group. While the Chair introduces the proposed organization of work, I wish to encourage you to closely look at the proposed structure and organization of work for the third OECPR, which has been circulated and posted on the committee website by the Secretariat. In case there are any technical hiccups, there are many tech-savvy people around to help you, so please let them know. Okay. Plenary and overall coordination. As the chair, Ambassador John Moretti will be presiding over the plenary sessions on Friday, and negotiations on the following 4 draft resolutions and following 4 draft decisions and 1 draft resolution. First of all, the draft decisions. Number 1, provisional agenda, date and venue of the 4th session of the United Nations Environment Assembly. Number 2, extension of the delivery date for the 6th Global Environment Outlook. Number 3, management of trust funds and earmark contributions. And number 4, improving communication on the environment. As for the draft resolution, this would be contributions of the United Nations Environment Assembly to the high-level political forum on sustainable development. Negotiations on the above decisions and resolution will begin tomorrow at 9 a.m. in conference room 9. Then there is contact group 1, which I would be facilitating, and this would cover the following draft resolutions. This would be number 6, marine litter and microplastics, pollution mitigation, number 7, pollution mitigation by mainstreaming biodiversity into key sectors. Number 8, enhancing the work of the United Nations Environment Programme to promote the development and strengthening of water quality monitoring programs and to encourage data sharing. Number 9, clean water for all, leaving no one behind. And number 10, accelerating efforts to address water pollution and to protect and restore water-related ecosystems. And number 11, addressing water pollution to protect and restore. I think it has been like printed twice. Actually, we've been trying to merge these resolutions, so let's hope it goes well. Okay. So, but nevertheless, the title is Addressing Water Pollution to Protect and Restore Water-Related Ecosystems. They're almost identical, but then, the details might be different. Negotiations on these resolutions will also begin tomorrow, that is 30th of November 2017, from 9 to 12 in conference room 10, in parallel with the other group. Okay. Then contact group 2, Her Excellency Ms. Elizabeth Taylor will coordinate the contact group 2 for the following draft resolutions. This is number 12, environment and health. 13, strengthening health and environmental action in Asia and the Pacific, and supporting the initiatives of the Asia-Pacific Regional Forum on Health and Environment. Number 14, eliminating exposure to lead paint. 15, promoting environmentally sound management of used lead-acid batteries. Number 16, calling for the synchronization of objectives and activities, especially the meetings of the governing bodies of the multilateral environmental agreements and protocols thereto, for the efficient implementation of the 2030 Agenda, for sustainable development and monitoring thereof, for cost reduction, and for the effective participation of states members of the United Nations. Contact Group 2 will begin their negotiations today from 2 to 6 p.m. and will continue tomorrow from 6 to 9 p.m. in Conference Room 11 in parallel with consultations on the ministerial outcome document. I've already spoken about the Contact Group 3, and as for Contact Group 4, His Excellency Mr. Marek Gazetki will coordinate the following draft resolutions. Number 19, investing in innovative environmental solutions for accelerating implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. Number 20, managing soil pollution to achieve sustainable development. This group will start negotiations today and this will be from 6 to 9 p.m. in Conference Room 14. In the event of a need for further negotiations, the group continues work tomorrow at 2 p.m. And of course, needless to say, we reiterate the continuous request for flexibility, and hopefully we will be able to conclude as soon as possible, but certainly there is a possibility of taking it further to the Assembly itself if we don't reach agreement. But let us try our best. Okay. Okay. I now propose that we defer approval, or rather we approve the establishment of contact groups, but at the same time we also give the opportunity to proponents who may wish to withdraw their resolutions. The floor is open. Okay. Any proposal to merge resolutions? Okay, we don't see any now, but perhaps there might be some, as we progress into the OECPR. Okay. And now the floor is open for any comments, questions, inputs that any delegation might have. I see none. So we move to the next item, which is preparation of draft resolutions. Under this agenda item, I will report to you the status of draft resolutions and draft decisions, which had begun on 19 September 2017 in the subcommittee setting. The report is available on the portal, which was as set out in UNEP/OECPR/3/4. Okay. I am pleased to present the Chair's report to the third open-ended meeting of the Committee of Permanent Representatives. The report highlights the work done by the Committee of Permanent Representatives in fulfillment of its mandate as the intersessional body of the UN Environment Assembly. A significant part of this report is devoted to the preparations of draft resolutions and decisions for consideration by the UN Environment Assembly. The committee agreed on intersessional work arrangements at its subcommittee meeting on 7 September 2017. Bureau members would serve as facilitators for the consultations on the resolutions. Consultations on resolutions began on 19 September 2017, and the send-off of the resolutions was decided to be on the 140th Committee of Permanent Representatives meeting. In light of the limited texts actually submitted, I think this is an old text because the clustering did take place. So we have had clustering or contact groups, as you will, which I just spoke about. And resolutions were assigned to different facilitators. I think the understanding is that the facilitators would continue till the conclusion of OECPR. Of course, this is without prejudice to the prerogative of UNEA to appoint their own facilitators, which I'm sure they'll be doing. Okay, between 19 September 2017 and 24 October 2017, Bureau members of the committee facilitated consultations on 16 draft resolutions and 3 draft decisions, with support from the Secretariat. Most resolutions were subjected to 2 readings. Delegations were encouraged to consider merging resolutions addressing similar topics such as those on air and water pollution. Informal consultations among the proponents and interested delegations continued and may still be continuing, as we speak, hopefully. In compliance with the emphasis on the relevance to the theme towards a pollution-free planet, many draft resolutions address different types of pollution such as air pollution, water pollution, soil pollution, marine litter and microplastics, or chemical pollution, specifically lead in paint and batteries. Others focus on the link between pollution and other spheres. These include environment and health, pollution prevention in areas affected by armed conflicts and terrorism, as well as pollution mitigation by mainstreaming biodiversity. Some seek to promote innovative solutions for sustainable development. Others address institutional and administrative issues, from lofty goals like greater visibility for the Environment Assembly at the high-level political forum and synchronizing the objectives and activities of multilateral environmental agreements and protocols to practical matters like the deadline for the submission of the 6th Global Environment Outlook, management of trust funds, and the details of the Assembly. Some of the general issues raised in the consultations included respect for respective mandates of different entities and degree of interagency cooperation and partnership, feasibility, including the capacity of an UN Environment Programme to implement requests made, scope, like national or regional versus global, and sensitivities such as transboundary environmental issues and treatment of subjects like terrorism. The results of the committee's work during the intersessional period constitute the package of the 140th meeting of the committee. Is transmitting to the, or actually has transmitted, but obviously to give you more time to take a look at it, to the third OECPR. And okay, we now have 16 resolutions and 4 draft decisions. 3 resolutions on air pollution have been merged into a single draft. Consultations continue on 3 drafts of water and on 2 drafts on environment and health. Notwithstanding the difficulties, prospects of merger are encouraging, although there is, of course, the perennial time constraint. If the resolutions on water, lead, as well as environment and health are successfully merged, we expect to have 12 draft resolutions and 4 decisions. Proponents will update the open-ended meeting of the committee about progress in the informal consultations. I hope that, given the fact that all the drafts are uploaded on the resolutions platform, delegations, including those from capitals, will agree to work on the basis of the amended drafts, where progress has been achieved by proponents and interested delegations. Let us all work together to attain consensus on this package of drafts that moves us in the right direction towards a pollution-free planet. I wish to thank all members of the Committee of Permanent Representatives for their hard work, active engagement, support and cooperation during this time. I pay special tribute to non-resident representatives who participated in the process by remote means, sometimes at very inconvenient hours, and to all who submitted comments through the resolutions platform. I am grateful to my colleagues, members of the Bureau, who continue to serve as facilitators, and of course to the Secretariat for its consistent and unflinching support. Further to my report, I would like to invite proponents to update us on the progress of possible withdrawal of texts. Okay. We still do not have anything. Okay, but I'm sure we'll be updated as we progress. Now, okay. Now I invite you to turn your attention to presentation of new drafts and decisions. There is one draft resolution which was not introduced during consultations. I invite the delegation of Burkina Faso to introduce the draft resolution on promoting environmentally sound management of used lead-acid batteries, ULABs, on behalf of the African group. Burkina Faso, you have the floor. Okay. Fine. I think they are still refining the draft, so hopefully they'll be able to enlighten us during the next plenary. Okay. Does any delegation wish to introduce new proposals of draft resolutions? Kenya, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We do have a draft resolution on strengthening of UNEP, but we would like an opportunity to present this a little bit later. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kenya, for this timely information, and we all look forward to your draft. Any other delegation wishing to introduce a resolution, a decision? Okay. Thank you. So now okay. So with this, we adopt the organization of work as presented to you. Any objections to that? I see none. So the organization of work is adopted. Okay. We go to this administrative. Okay. The next item, agenda item, is administrative and budgetary matters. As you will recall, the budget for 2018-19 was adopted by the UN Environment Assembly at its second session. So the Executive Director will not introduce a budget at this session. Before I invite the Deputy Executive Director to introduce this item, which focuses on the management of trust funds, I suggest that we further consider the draft decision, management of trust funds and earmark contributions, and take a decision on it in the contact group. I also wish to inform you that the draft decision, management of trust funds and earmark contributions, has been revised, taking into account feedback, and is available on the resolutions platform for Member States' consideration. This will allow the plenary to continue and ensure a prompt finalization of this item in the contact group. Now I am pleased to invite Mr. Ibrahim Thiaw, the Deputy Executive Director of the United Nations Environment Programme. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, my task is quite simple this time around, which is to introduce the request from the Executive Director for your approval of 2 new funds under the Green Climate Fund, which were established after UNEA 2, and 3 new funds for the Minamata Convention that came into effect in August of this year. The draft decision also seeks the authorization to reassign balances of inactive trust funds in consultation with the relevant parties to facilitate timely closure of projects and trust funds as applicable. The Executive Director will report on progress in reducing the level of inactive trust funds and related trust balances, fund balances in UNEA 4. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Executive Director. I'm sure delegations have taken very careful and sympathetic note of your request. And
we can continue.
Okay. We now continue. I would now propose moving into the next agenda item. Any objection? European Union, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, distinguished delegates. The EU and its member states would like to thank the Executive Director and the Secretariat for the presentation of the draft decision, management of trust funds and the earmark contributions. This is an important decision. It's necessary for the continuity of the trust fund supporting the implementation of the program of work of a UN Environment Programme and the multilateral environment agreements, as well as the establishment of the new trust funds. While straightforward in its objective, we found the initial draft not fully user-friendly, and we thank the Secretariat for the substantial improvements done in the collaborative spirit. We also welcome the Executive Director's report highlighting the challenges of on managing multiple trust funds and to propose steps which could be taken to reduce the administrative burden of managing these trust funds, as it was requested by the previous Governing Council and the UNEA 2 decisions and resolutions. As it is shown in that document, some of the trust funds are very old and inactive. The EU and its member states made a recommendation that the inactive trust funds are closed. Where appropriate and in accordance to agreements with the respective donors, the dormant amounts can be relocated to activities agreed under the Programme of Work or respective MEAs, or if the trust fund concerns a single donor, to the donor if it is so wished. We advocate that the language in the decision should be further strengthened to ensure that the meaningful and comprehensive action is taken to create a better overview of the funds and the areas they pertain to, and to review and close all relevant inactive trust funds in agreement with donors and parties where appropriate. We look forward to a constructive discussion on this decision, as we believe the dormant funds remain quite significant at the moment. The effort to release them for relevant activities will be an important achievement, especially in light of the currently decreasing contributions from Member States. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, EU. And now, with your indulgence, we move to the next agenda item, which is the update on the 6th Global Environment Outlook. I propose that we consider the draft decision extension of the delivery date for the 6th Global Environment Outlook to the contact group. I mean, we pass it on to the contact group for discussion. And once again, it is my pleasure to invite the Deputy Executive Director to inform us as briefly as possible on the 6th edition of the Global Environment Outlook. Mr. Thiaw, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Global Environment Outlook is UN Environment Programme's flagship product. It stands at the core of UN Environment's mandate, and it is an effort supported by the entire organization. Agenda item number 6 before you today is only aimed at adopting the corrected time frame for presenting this report to the 4th UN Environmental Assembly. You will recall that when the date of the GO6 was agreed, Member States thought that UNEA 3 would be held in 2018. So the date for the delivery of GO6 was set for 2018. However, later on, UNEA 3 was set for 2017, and the date for UNEA 4 was moved to 2019. Hence, we have this operational resolution, which is to realign the date for delivery of GO6 with the date of UNEA 4. A progress report on the Global Environment Outlook is also provided to you as part of the documentation for this 3rd session of the UN Environmental Assembly. As you know, a series of regional assessments were conducted and presented to you at our 2nd session of the UN Environmental Assembly. These are being used as the basis for the Global Outlook. Today, I wanted to emphasize more on the process than on the final product itself. The underlying, ongoing, open and consultative process that leads to the final publication is critically important. Over more than 30 years, the process continues to bring together global voices from hundreds of leaders and partners in science, in politics, civil society and private sector in an open and transparent manner. This has contributed to the creation of a global community of stakeholders who continue to learn from each other along the way and who are strongly committed to the improvement of global environmental policy. The 6th edition of the Global Environmental Outlook will offer a high-level analysis based on emerging science, also taking stock of all other major global environmental assessments. The Outlook's 6th edition will feature major innovations. First, more emphasis on emerging issues and target-seeking scenarios. Second, a stronger focus on the enhanced policy effectiveness and impact. 2/3 of the report will focus on the policy effectiveness and outlook, while the traditional focus on state and trends of the environment will only cover 1/3 of the report. Preparations for the 6th edition of the Global Environment Outlook report are in full swing with a positive momentum. There is appreciation with the progress achieved so far. There is a great group of experts contributing to and overseeing the process, and many of you are present in this room today. While much remains to be done, especially in terms of resource mobilization, the Secretariat intends to present the full GEO, including the summary for policymakers, at the 4th session of the UN Environmental Assembly in 2019, at the High-Level Political Forum in 2019 as well. Progress report of the Executive Director on the development of the 6th Global Environment Outlook is therefore before you. We have few recommendations that we'd be happy to share with you if you would like to have a conversation with the Secretariat. But the main point that we would like to make today is to seek your permission to defer the publication to 2019. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Executive Director. And the floor is open for any comments. Okay.
United States of America, European Union.
United States, you have the floor, followed by the EU.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Deputy Executive Director Thiao, for this presentation. And I see the Chief Scientist up on the dais. I acknowledge the important work that he has contributed in making the GEO the success that we hope it will be. We appreciate this. We think it is important that we continue to identify GEO as the flagship assessment of UNEP, and we give it the appropriate support to ensure its quality and give it the appropriate time so that it can be properly vetted, reviewed, peer-reviewed, and that it will in fact serve member states by providing information to them. And so we think it is the appropriate decision to delay the publication of it until 2019 to UNEA 4, given the accelerated date of UNEA 3 that we are celebrating here this week and next. With that in mind, we have seen the modifications that have come out of the Committee of Permanent Representatives, and we are certainly supportive of the idea. We anticipate that the GEO6 will be a document of several hundred pages, and so the recommendation that it be available 3 months in advance of the UNEA 4 we think is appropriate, because in fact the document needs to be in advance by at least 6 weeks, I would say, of the negotiation of the summary for policymakers. But I would indicate that we have a slight amendment that we might put into the resolution that would allow for the summary for policymakers not to require that it also be completed that 6 months in advance, to allow greater flexibility of the Secretariat in next fall, or this fall, the fall of 2018, in scheduling around the major environmental conferences that are already on the calendar, including biodiversity and the UNFCCC. So that document comes out, the summary for policymakers, which will be negotiated, will be a document of between 10 and 30 pages on the outside. While we understand it may take member states 3 months to actually carefully examine a document that is 300 to 500 pages long, we hope that having the summary for policymakers a little bit closer to the meeting will be allowed, so we will introduce some language to that. We did want to highlight the importance of this and to re-emphasize the absolute necessity that GEO6 is a very well referenced document, that all of the information in it can be easily identified to its original source information, and that we can in fact go back and clearly provide information on the conclusions that are being drawn. Again, conclusions that are policy relevant but not policy prescriptive. And so we want to once again encourage the Secretariat in all of its efforts to ensure that the authors meticulously document all references in terms of information and facts, figures, tables, and data. Not simply to a publication, but because referencing a publication of several hundred pages is insufficient. We actually need to know where to go in that publication to see that the conclusions drawn upon it are in fact correct. Finally, I would say that having been a member of the high-level group advising on the GEO6, one thing has been apparent. We think one of the most valuable components of the GEO6 will be the analysis of the effectiveness of policy decisions that have been taken. However, to truly understand and to document the effectiveness of policy decisions, we need to understand the state of the environment in particular countries and regions. And it is absolutely critical that countries redouble their efforts and UNEP redouble its efforts in support of countries and regions to collect and make public more environmental information on everything from pollution, the pollution issues that we are going to be discussing at this meeting. And so that we hope that the resolutions include provisions for encouraging governments to collect more data on pollution and the state of the environment and to make that public so we can actually determine whether programs and policies are effective in changing the curve of and moving us towards a pollution-free planet. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, US, for very practical suggestions. This topic has taken quite a few man-hours, if you will, in the process leading up to OECPR. And I think this point about referencing is very valuable. In fact, if the soft version, like the web version, could have like those hyperlinks and all that take you to the source, that would truly be, user-friendly. It may not be very easy to do, but certainly I'm sure with luminaries like you in the group, we will see a very valuable product. Thank you very much. EU, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm speaking on behalf of the European Union and its member states, and we're making the statement in relation to the progress report on the assumption that the draft decision on GEO6 and the delivery date will be dealt with separately later on. So on this understanding, we thank the Executive Director and his Deputy for updating us on the progress in preparing GEO6. Mr. Chair, keeping the environment under review is part of the core mandate of the UN Environment Programme, and therefore it should be a priority under the Environment Fund. We express strong support to the overall GEO6 process, which in this sense, like the United States before us, we consider to be a flagship project of the program. And we're emphasizing this because a well-functioning science policy interface really enables sound policy making for the benefit of the environment. And in turn, producing a high-quality global environment outlook is a crucial part of delivering on the policy interface. However, the EU and its member states note with concern the financing shortages in the GEO6 process, and we would welcome further clarification on the core budget allocations from the Environment Fund, including projections and flexibility. So we invite the Executive Director to prepare at his earliest convenience, detailed written information on these financial issues related to the finalization of GEO6. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, EU. I'm sure your concerns have been duly noted by the Secretariat, and we'll be hearing from them as we move along. Colombia, you have the floor, madam.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Chair. We would like to thank the Deputy Executive Director for his report on the progress made in this area. We would also like to support that said by the USA, mainly on the need to ensure high standards of quality for this report, this technical report, which will be submitted in the future. At the same time, we would also like to ensure that due to the length of this report, we can also ensure that it's submitted for consideration by the various member states in a timely manner so that we can ensure it is the outcome which we are all striving towards. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Colombia. I would now ask the Deputy Executive Director if he has any comment or reaction to what he has heard. Please go ahead, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Excellencies, thank you for the guidance and the comments. I'll just maybe comment on 2 points. One is the point made by the United States with regards to the date of submission of the report. We will do our utmost to produce the report on time for the fourth session of the UN Environmental Assembly. And we are looking forward to your decision with regards to the dates for the fourth session, and we will do our utmost to accommodate your request. It is indeed in our plans. The second is from the comments from the EU, or rather the request from the EU for additional information on the financial matters for GEO. We will be happy to provide you with that information. I just want to note that, and we will say this in the next agenda item number 8, that the Secretariat is faced with some challenges. One is a very large mandate and accumulative mandates also coming from new resolutions being adopted in UNIA sessions on one hand, and on the other hand, a reduced contribution from the Environment Fund. And that puts the Secretariat in a very, very difficult situation where we have to deliver an increasing mandate with reduced funding. We will come back to that in agenda item number 6, but we will be happy to provide you, to provide the EU with the core financial resources that have been allocated to GEO, as well as extra budgetary resources. And maybe if you allow us, we will also give you some sort of analysis with comparing the budget for GEO with budgets for similar reports in the UN that you may be familiar with, just to give you a sense of the financial situation. Mr. Chairman, I will be remiss not to say what the Secretariat has insisting that I should say, that indeed the Global Environment Outlook is currently run with a shortfall in its funding, and we will do our best to provide them with additional funding from the Environment Fund for next year, but they will still be run in a shortfall. So we will continue to count on member states and other stakeholders that are willing to provide extra budgetary financial resources so that we can deliver this seminal report on a timely fashion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thiaw. And I think this is the kind of candid exchange that we need to have a handle of what exactly ails the process. I think it's very important to know. And it would be very helpful to get regular updates in the intersessional period on what exactly are the difficulties, where does the problem lie, rather than keeping it in hibernation and then breaking it to member states, right before UNEA 4 that we are sorry, it now has to go to 2020 or something like that. So I think that is something that we need to avoid. As far as follow-up mechanism is concerned, it's no rocket science. We can all manage that, but we need greater clarity and clearer communication. And I'm sure we will find you a very willing partner in that. Okay, with this, I now propose that we defer the consideration of agenda item number 7 because we would like our worthy president of UNEA to be with us for consideration of this item. So we defer it to the afternoon session. And so my proposal is that we defer this to agenda item 7 to the afternoon session and now go to agenda item 8. Any objection to this proposal? Okay, I see none. Thank you very much. We now move to agenda item 8, which is budget and program performance, including implementation of the Assembly's resolution. And this again will be introduced by the Deputy Executive Director, Mr. Ibrahim Thiaw. You have the floor, sir. So Mr. Thiaw wants you to fasten your seat belts because this will be much longer. So you might be here for lunch, which obviously he will arrange. Thank you. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is good to have a chair that is totally transparent. I was actually whispering to him. Mr. President, my presentation will be structured in 3 components. First, I will give you an overview of the program performance for the period from January 2016 to June 2017. Second, I will share with you our analysis as Secretariat on the implementation of resolutions from UNEA 2. And third, I will give you a very brief overview of the 19 progress updates submitted by the Executive Director. In the interest of time, we will only briefly introduce specific recommendations under each of the 19 reports. You have received these reports, and we hope that you have been able to read them. I would like to recognize all my colleagues in the back of the room, all directors and leaders of the organization that are here, much more competent to respond to any questions you may have. I am just tasked to actually deliver the message, but the competence is in the back of the room. First, overview of the program performance. In 2014, the UN Environment Assembly approved a program of work and budget for the period 2016-2017 in line with the UN Environment's medium-term strategy 2014-2017. The overview I'm going to present is in response to Member States' request for a short summary. It complements the more detailed presentation made available to Member States for the consultation that took place in October 2017 on the program performance review. The presentation covers the period January 2016 to June 2017, as I said earlier. UN Environment Programme's overall progress shows that 53% of the indicator targets set for December 2017 in the organization's program of work have reached 75% mark, or even exceeded that mark, 3/4 of the way into the biennium. From the lens of the expected accomplishments, 70% of expected accomplishments, i.e. outcomes, have reached the 75% mark in the biennium. You may understand why we are referring to 75%, because we are 3/4 away by June 2017, away from the end of the biennium. Overall, the income received as of June 2017 exceeds by $10 million the targeted budget, which was $678 million for the biennium 2016-2017. While we have been successful in mobilizing higher than envisaged earmarked income from extra budgetary resources, we have received much less than anticipated Environment Fund income. A higher than planned earmarked income is attributable partially from the organization's ability to use its Environment Fund staffing to leverage earmarked contribution. For every dollar of Environment Fund income spent on staff, we have been able to leverage $2 in extra budgetary funding. While the UN Environment Programme appreciates the confidence and support of its generous donors, we have to recognize that this scenario of imbalance towards earmarked contributions comes with its own challenges. Indeed, it gives less flexibility to senior management to respond to emerging issues or respond to urgent needs to develop new policies. The total expenditure for January 2016 to June 2017 is $737 million. The expenditure appears higher than the income only because the available resources include project funds received in previous years that were meant to be spent in the current biennium. Expenditures are thus in line with what was planned. Multi-year contributions received in 2015 and prior years enabled the organization to have more earmarked resources available to use in the current biennium, and hence a higher expenditure than the projected budget for the period. There are a number of reasons why the organization has not yet reached the 75% mark for some indicator targets, 3/4 in the way into the biennium. For programs such as climate change and ecosystem management, results that emanate from our portfolio of global environmental facility funded initiatives are only being reported between September and December. The UN Environment Programme and the Global Environment Facility reporting timelines are not aligned, with the latter one occurring once in a year in the year's last quarter. Significant results from GEF-funded programs are therefore not captured in the reporting period. Second, allow me to share with you the analysis that we have made on the implementation of resolutions from UNEA 2. The second session of the UN Environmental Assembly adopted, as you recall, 25 resolutions that address 12 specific themes. These include implementing the Paris Agreement, promoting sustainable production and consumption, food waste, etc., etc. You may recall all the themes. UN Environment Programme operates under 7 thematic priorities: climate change, disasters and conflicts, ecosystem management, environmental governance, chemicals and waste, resource efficiency, and environment under review. Plans were developed to implement the 25 resolutions within these thematic areas, and implementation has begun on all the resolutions. Some resolutions have achieved several major milestones. For example, significant progress has been made in the implementation of Resolution 1211 on marine plastic litter and microplastics. The Environment Programme established an advisory group to guide the development of the assessment of effectiveness of relevant international, regional, and sub-regional governance strategies and approaches to combat marine plastic litter and microplastics. Support is being provided to the development and revision of marine litter action plans in several countries and to the implementation of existing action plans in others. The Clean Seas campaign was launched by the UN Environment Programme in February 2017 with the aim of engaging governments, the general public, civil society, and the private sector in the fight against marine litter. Over 30 countries have joined the campaign to date. The commitments made by those countries are displayed on the website of the Clean Seas campaign. Under Resolution 214 on illegal trade in wildlife and wildlife products, the Environment Programme has worked with the International Union for Conservation of Nature and the International Institute for Environment and Development to develop a thorough assessment of best practices in local community involvement in wildlife management. The analyses have been shared widely to review with partners. In the report, lessons learned from decades of experience in community-based wildlife management around the world are compared with recent experience gained since the beginning of the current wildlife trade crisis. The Environment Programme, through the World Conservation Monitoring Center, has initiated work to assess and quantify the multiple threats to wildlife and biodiversity, such as illegal trade in wildlife as well as habitat conversion, hunting, and invasive alien species. The Environment Programme has also supported, in collaboration with the CITES Secretariat, the development and implementation of national legislation related to illegal trade in wildlife in multiple countries in Africa, in Asia, and Latin America. Plans are underway to extend technical legal assistance to 7 other countries in various parts of the world. The One United Nations Global Wild for Life campaign, launched by the Secretariat of the Environment Programme in partnership with the UN Development Programme, the CITES Secretariat, the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, in May 2016 has now reached over 1 billion people around the world. Under Resolution 26 on supporting the Paris Agreement, the Environment Programme provided assistance to 35 countries in the preparation of their intended national determined contribution before the 21st session of the Conference of the Parties in Paris, and is preparing a new program to provide in-depth support to 10 additional countries over the next 4 years. The UN Environment Programme has been supporting countries in strengthening their legal and regulatory frameworks, including by providing guides and toolkits, and is also supporting countries in the implementation of adaptation action with funding provided by the Global Environment Facility, the Adaptation Fund, and the Green Climate Fund. These are just few examples of achievements that have been made, though more advancements has been made in some resolutions than others. The resolutions were adopted after the approval of the 2016-2017 budget and program of work cycle. However, the expectation from member states is that their implementation begin within a pre-approved program of work that did not include the consideration of future resolutions. This sometimes results in uneven implementation with the resolutions that already have some work already underway with the program of work, or are topics that are better able to attract extra budgetary funding, achieving more objectives than others. And I believe this is one of the comments made earlier on by the Africa Group. For example, resources to implement Resolution 2.3 on investing in human capacity and sustainable development through environmental education and training have been extremely limited. The Global Universities Partnership Forum, held every year up until 2016 to build capacity, share experiences, and galvanize the potential of the network, was cancelled in 2017, owing to a lack of resources. This setback compromised the program's potential to contribute to the Global Action Program on Education for Sustainable Development and contribute more efficiently and effectively to building a cadre of young leaders with knowledge on sustainability to deliver on the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Resolution 2.8 on sustainable consumption and production supports Goal 12 of the Sustainable Development Goal, but is the least well-resourced in all goals. However, there are high expectations that the United Nations will play an important and catalytic role. To fully implement this resolution will require increased engagement and support from member states and stakeholders, including increased financial resources for the delivery of Sustainable Development Goal 12 and implementation of all programs under the 10-year framework on programs on sustainable consumption and production patterns, and for the work of the International Resources Panel. Resources to implement Resolution 2.9 on the prevention, reduction, and reuse of food waste, and to strengthen the work of the UN Environment Programme to combat food waste have also been extremely limited thus far. To further develop the activities and programs for the long term, additional core and extra budgetary resources will be needed. The same can be said for Resolution 213, Sustainable Management of Natural Capital for Sustainable Development and Poverty Eradication. Lack of resources are not the only limitations. Some resolutions require actions from other stakeholders to be fully implemented. For example, full implementation of Resolution 214 would require member states, intergovernmental organizations, donors, and civil society to ensure that any strategies, action plans, programs, and projects to combat the unsustainable use and illegal trade in wildlife fully recognize, integrate, and implement key insights from extensive research and program on community wildlife management, including with respect to enforcement strategies. This is not to say that every effort is not being made to address these resolutions, and the resolutions often enrich the portfolio of projects in the sub-programs. But these were some of which progress could not be made as forcefully as we wanted. Updates from resolutions in which reports were requested from the Executive Director for the third Assembly have been made available as part of the package of pre-session documents, including progress made and recommendations and suggested actions. We would like to propose a few actions for your consideration. It is anticipated that the third Assembly, this one, will adopt several resolutions for which it is expected that implementation will begin in the following year. However, the 2018-19 Program of Work and Budget have already been approved, as you know, have been approved by UNEA 2. This places an additional pressure on the program to seek extra budgetary funding to meet the expectations set out in the resolutions and can result in uneven implementation. The Assembly may want to consider how to line up the adoption of resolutions with the program and budget cycles, or to ensure that resolutions have adequate funding before the fourth session of the UN Environmental Assembly, which will take place in 2019. Mr. Chairman, I now have the pleasure of introducing the 19 reports, but as I said, you have them in your documentation, and instead of reading the full report, allow me to go through a few recommendations. First, draft resolution 25 that we adopted at UNEA 2 on delivering the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. As you can read in the progress update submitted by the Executive Director, multiple activities are underway. The newest and most important development is the UN Secretary General's reform agenda, in particular the reform of the UN development system. The environmental agenda has never been as relevant as it is today with the Sustainable Development Goals. The UN Environmental Assembly, as the world's authoritative voice on the environment, may wish to continue to play an active role in, 1, contributing and shaping the regional sustainable development fora. This can be done through the regional environmental ministerial fora, as well as through the relevant vice presidents of the UN Environmental Assembly Bureau. 2, you may wish to mandate the Executive Director to produce, as of 2019, regular reports that you may want to call sustainability gap reports. These will assess progress made from the sustainability angle in the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goal using the indicators and targets. And 3, you may want to request the Secretariat to produce regular policy briefs or issue briefs on the nexus between the environment, the environmental, the social, and the economic pillars of different goals and targets. The next report is related to the role and functions of regional forums of ministers of the environment and environment authorities. The recommendations that we would like to put to you are the following 2 recommendations: that regional forums of ministers of the environment and environment authorities play a key role in building regional consensus on environmental issues and will continue to play an important role in the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. Efforts to further support and strengthen these forums would be sustained. Second recommendation, regional environmental ministers fora may wish to establish strong links with other regional processes, including regional sustainable development fora. I would like to report that we have been privileged in supporting regional ministerial fora all over the world, in Africa, in Asia Pacific, in Europe, Latin America, and the Caribbean, as well as the Arab region. The next report I have already addressed the issue of environmental education, that is Resolution 2.3, so I will pass. Resolution 4 was related to the Samoa Pathway, the short name. We would like to recommend that the UN Environmental Assembly recognizes the work carried out to incorporate the Samoa Pathway into the activities of UN Environment. You may also wish to undertake to continue to serve as a forum for sharing information on the implementation of the environmental dimension of the Samoa Pathway. Resolution 26, the Paris Agreement. We have initiated a number of important activities that you will find in the report. Few recommendations for your consideration. The Environmental Assembly may wish to acknowledge the importance of legislation in ensuring the effectiveness of country-level efforts to address the challenges of climate change. You may also wish to note with appreciation the request made by COP23 of the Climate Convention that the UN Environment continues to host the Climate Technology Center and Network, the famous CTCN, the operative arm of the Convention's technology mechanism. We were very happy to have that appreciation from COP23, and we hope that the UN Environment Assembly will take note of that. The Environment Programme has been strongly supporting the implementation of the Paris Agreement in the context of the 2030 Agenda, and in promoting the coordination of related efforts across the UN system. Next resolution is 27, related to sound management of chemicals and waste. The Executive Director referred to the entry into force of the Minamata Convention and the organization of the first conference of the parties. And we would like to take this opportunity to thank the government of Switzerland for hosting this first COP. We also would like to thank the government of Brazil for hosting the first intersessional process of the sound management of chemicals and waste beyond 2020, which took place in Brasilia. We note with appreciation that 7 countries have already received financial support from the special program on chemicals. And there are other important activities that will be undertaken by the organization, including the publishing in 2018 of a report on endocrine disrupting chemicals, environmentally persistent organic pollutants, and the Sustainable Development Goals. Next report is 2.8, Resolution 2.8, Sustainable Consumption and Production. Again, I have mentioned this in my overall summary. We would like to recommend that system-based approaches such as the circular economy be seriously considered, because indeed you can save resources, both natural resources and financial resources, by promoting circular economy. There are other recommendations that you will find in the report. Next is a report on prevention, reduction, and reuse of food waste. Again, I have mentioned it in my overall summary, where we said that we have made good progress, especially cooperation with the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, but there is still a lot to be done. We have also cooperated with the Climate and Clean Air Coalition's Municipal Solid Waste Initiative, as well as with other institutions. Resolution 211 I have also addressed in my summary, that is related to marine plastic and microplastics. You would pardon me that I will go quickly on this. Next is 212 on sustainable coral reefs, coral reef management. That is Resolution 212. We would like to recommend that every effort is made to reduce pressure on coral reefs, in particular reefs which are climate change refugia. We would like to propose the strengthening of the global coral reef monitoring network, including committing to sharing data for improved reporting, as well as supporting network coordination at the global as well as at the regional level. Resolution 214 on illegal trade in wildlife, I have largely addressed in my overall summary. Again, you would pardon me that I will go quickly through this one. Resolution 215, which is related to the protection of the environment in areas affected by armed conflicts. We have been working with many countries that are affected by armed conflicts to provide assistance to these countries affected by armed conflicts. We have worked in particular with Afghanistan, Iraq, Nigeria, Somalia, South Sudan, Sudan, and Ukraine, to name only these. We have also worked with the International Law Commission, as well as our colleagues at UNESCO, supporting the protection of natural World Heritage Sites that are affected also by armed conflicts. In terms of recommendation, we would like to propose that the UN Environmental Assembly may wish to consider creating a mechanism with commensurate resources to generate an independent review of the efforts by states to implement the provision of the resolutions or some version of a peer review mechanism for the same purpose. Next is Resolution 217 on synergies amongst biodiversity-related conventions. We have been working with many conventions and many parties also to assist them at the national level. And we have been very fortunate to actually generate additional financial resources, in particular from the European Union and Switzerland, to help us carry out this work. So we are working with all the biodiversity-related conventions, but also working with member states at the national focal points. Worth noting here is the work that we are doing, the portal that we have established, the information portal on multilateral environmental agreements, better known as InfoMEA, which seems to be very well appreciated. 218 is a resolution on the relationship between the UN Environment Programme and its MEAs, the MEA for which it provides the Secretariat. We have gone a long way in actually improving these relations, and I'm very happy to report that thanks to efforts made by the conventions, but also by the UN Environment Programme Secretariat, we have resolved much of the difficulties that we were facing in the past, especially administrative and financial frameworks, institutional frameworks, and accountability, as well as mutual support in terms of program of work. Of course, we will continue to work in this area, but we have made a lot of good progress. Next is the Montevideo Program, 219. Very pleased to note that 84 member states have, at the time of the reporting, nominated their focal points, and we would like to encourage those that have not done so to please nominate their focal points so that the program will continue. Next is the resolution on sand and dust storms. We have published the global assessment on sand and dust storms, which was conducted with, in cooperation with the World Meteorological Organization, as well as with the UN Convention to Combat Desertification. We have contributed to different international fora, including the one held in Tehran in July of this year, and we have begun the preparation of a strategy. We would like to recommend that the UN Environmental Assembly may wish to consider encouraging member states and stakeholders to increase their engagement and support, including financial resources, to implement the recommendations from the global assessment. We also would like to encourage member states and the UN Environment Programme itself to bring to wider public attention the damaging effects, of sand and dust storms and cost-effective options for sources and impact mobilization. I have another two, and I'll be done, Mr. Chairman. One is sustainable pastoralism and rangeland management. We have made some progress, but we are still far from being satisfied with the implementation of this decision, in particular due to lack of financial resources. We have initiated a number of project proposals, and we hope that financial resources will follow. International water quality guidelines. This was a recommendation from a previous assembly for which we reported at UNEA 2. So far, we are very happy to report that 61 countries, against a target of 8, have already shown an interest and have been supporting the consultation process. We have received very valuable feedback from member states, which basically says that instead of one set of concrete guidelines for ecosystems, that a framework should be put in place that would assist countries in setting up their own national guidelines to protect and restore their water-related systems. And two, they also gave us a feedback that the work on international water quality guidelines should be brought in line with the 2030 agenda. Therefore, in terms of follow-up, we think that the UN Environmental Assembly may wish to take note of the progress achieved so far, but also to allow the Executive Director to respect the feedback that has been received from member states, and therefore to develop the framework for freshwater ecosystem management and the creation of, to assist member states in the creation of their own national standards and guidelines. That was a long report, and I'm sure I have made half of the room asleep, but I had to make this report because it is a compulsory and mandatory report to the Executive Director. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Executive Director. You have certainly done a good job. And of course, when we are talking about potentially contentious issues, the more delegations that are asleep, the better. But still, I see a lot of, vigilant glances coming our way. So I would now open the floor for any comments, suggestions, reactions that delegations may have. European Union, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The EU and its member states appreciate the updates by UN Environment's Executive Director on the progress made to implement various resolutions. At this stage, we will like to provide our general comments and will submit our detailed comments in writing. In relation to the 2030 agenda, we would like to recall the major role of UNEA and the UN Environment Programme in the implementation and follow-up of Agenda 2030. In the report, we would have appreciated more analysis of how successful the UN Environment Programme has been in influencing high-level political forum outcomes and reports and recommendations on how to further strengthen UN Environment's involvement. We encourage the Executive Director to further use opportunities at the high-level political forum to highlight and strengthen the environmental dimension of the agenda and to increase awareness on the key role the environment has for overall sustainable development, including through effects on health, social costs, negative effects on economic growth and resilience. We would also have appreciated receiving more information on what concrete changes the UN Environment Programme's participation in the UN Development System reform has brought. We note with concern that several sections in the Resolution 2/5 were not covered in the progress report. We would welcome a brief update in relation to those. We would like the Environment Programme to provide information on its actions related to support to scientific panels as well as for strengthening policy relevance through increasing visibility of scientific reports. Concerning the Paris Agreement, EU and its member states welcome the result of COP23. We must continue to build on this momentum, considering the work ahead of us before COP24 next year, including the facilitative dialogue that will be another milestone. We acknowledge the Paris Agreement's irreversible and its full integrity and implementation are key for security and prosperity. While the EU and its member states are the largest provider of public climate finance, we call for future participation of a broader range of contributors. We also urge all countries to proceed with preparations and implementation of their nationally determined contributions and country-driven adaptation planning processes. In relation to the sound management of chemicals and waste, we call on the UN Environment Programme, governments and all relevant stakeholders to enhance efforts to reach the 2020 goal as contained in the SDG target 12.4 and on UNEP's work in relation to the Beyond 2020 process going to under SAICM. It will be very important in relation to ensuring that we will, after 2020, be able to undertake effective international efforts for the sound management of chemicals and waste. EU and its member states have included the cross-cutting matter of sound management of chemicals and waste as one of the basic pillars in the resolution on environment and health. Moreover, we find the sound management of chemicals and waste should be clearly reflected in the relevant outcome documents from UNEA 3, including the ministerial declaration. We expect the delayed overview for policymakers to implement the SDGs on this matter as requested in Resolution 2/7 to be issued in early 2018. We would also be interested to obtain more information on the state of play of the update to Global Waste Management Outlook, including on the complementary and interlinkages with the global chemicals outlook. Regarding the report on sustainable consumption and production, we urge the UN Environment Programme to achieve more coherence and synergies among its different sustainable consumption and production related actions. We encourage striving for concrete implementation projects that facilitate the shift towards more sustainable consumption and production patterns. We share the concern on the inadequate financial resources for the implementation of SDG 12 in general and the 10-year framework of programs on sustainable consumption and production patterns. In particular, we urge countries and others in a position to do so to become more involved in a 10-year framework of programs on sustainable consumption. We also note that there is a huge untapped potential from the private sector. Regarding marine plastic litter and microplastics, we note that recommendations in the report are reflected in the Norwegian proposal for a new marine litter resolution, and they should be discussed in that context. Concerning the biodiversity-related conventions, we will fully agree with the priorities of capacity building, monitoring and reporting mentioned in the report. We underline that the tool for modular reporting that is under development should help to improve and streamline reporting and thus significantly reduce the related workload. We find that streamlined and efficient monitoring and reporting is crucial to improve the implementation of the strategic plan for biodiversity 2011 till 2020 and its IKI biodiversity targets. With regard to the multilateral environmental agreements for which the UN Environment Programme provides the Secretariat, we note that the new update has been presented by the Secretariat late last week, hence our comments are preliminary. We find it especially important that programmatic priorities of the MEAs were reflected in the UN Environment Programme's medium-term strategy 2018-2021 and the programme of work. We encourage strengthening this mutual supportiveness of the work programmes in the future cycles. We also welcome that the framework of delegations of authority to MEA's secretariats has been simplified. However, the work on the flexible template to govern the provision of secretariat services has slipped to March next year. We hope there will be no further slippage, since this work will be very useful in relation to several MEAs, including the Basel, Rotterdam, Stockholm and Minamata conventions. In the revised version of the report, the commitment to waive the collection of the programme support cost is in relation to voluntary contributions to support the participation of developing countries in conferences of parties has been deleted. This important provision requested in Resolution 2/18 and contained in the financial rules of many MEAs is necessary to foster broader participation of developing countries, and its deletion is thus disappointing. We would like to hear more about the change in the allocations of tasks between the MEA's management team and the expanded leadership group. Finally, and more generally, we are concerned that the regular oversight of the implementation of resolutions is not fully integrated with the performance review of the programme of work and budget. We would like to recommend that the reporting format for both the resolutions and the programme of work and budget are discussed and adopted by CPR, and that this reporting is reintroduced as a standing agenda item in all regular meetings of the CPR, in line with its mandate. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, EU, and thank you for demonstrating to Mr. Thiau that his long presentation has not dampened your spirit. That's very encouraging. Norway, you have the floor, followed by New Zealand.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the Deputy Executive Director for his report. Let me first congratulate you on the impressive amount of efforts that you have undertaken to implement the resolutions from UNEA 2 last year, and in particular given the challenges that you highlighted in your previous presentation. It will come as no surprise to you that marine litter is a key priority to my government, and that we see this as an important part of UNEA 2's work. We therefore note with appreciation the report on the implementation of UNEA 211 resolution on marine litter and microplastics. And in particular, we welcome the assessment on the effectiveness of relevant international governance strategies to combat marine litter, that is the short title. This report has informed the preparation of the draft resolution on marine litter put forward for the consideration of the Assembly. And let me also say that we appreciate the short and succinct format of the reports, including recommendations and suggested action. And as pointed out by my EU colleague, the recommendations and actions in the report on Resolution 211 has informed us in the preparation of the draft resolution on marine litter and microplastics that is put forward for the consideration of the Third Environment Assembly. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Norway. New Zealand, you have the floor, followed by Switzerland.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to the Executive Director for the very comprehensive report back. Like others, we do appreciate the work that you are doing in this regard. However, I'm only going to comment on one follow-up issue, which relates to the role, functions and modalities for UNEP implementation of the Samoa pathway. Specifically, New Zealand was pleased to see UNEP open its sub-regional offices in the Pacific and the Caribbean, a presence which will assist in strengthening understanding of and engagement with the small island states of both sub-regions and with the critical challenges and environmental vulnerabilities they face. We were also pleased to see the APIA office co-located with the Secretariat for the Pacific Regional Environment Programme, which is good practice and will provide a ready platform for UNEP to work in close collaboration with and support of the regional agency and agenda. We strongly encourage such an approach and note that as the number of actors and development partners grow, the importance of effective coordination and collaboration is critical for the small administrations at both national and regional level. We note UNEP's contribution in the areas of environmental indicators and data management, which is a key challenge facing SIDS as they endeavour to respond to and monitor the 2030 agenda. We urge UNEP to align carefully with the Pacific Islands Forum SDG roadmap and its focus indicators and statistical needs so as to coordinate role and effort. Finally, New Zealand strongly supports the Samoa pathway, which articulated an agenda and call to partnership, which is critical to SIDS in this era of climate change. And we support the continued responsiveness of UNEP to the Samoa pathway and monitoring by the Environmental Assembly. Thank you.
Thank you, New Zealand. You have raised very significant points, and I think it also brings out the need for engagement in the intersessional period. And now, you know, we have this practice of being connected by remote link or whatever it is called. So I would urge, you know, all the Pacific Island states and as well as your delegation to remain engaged even after the, you know, the UNEA 3 sort of euphoria tends to level out. Thank you. Thank you for your points. Switzerland, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. We would like to thank the Deputy Executive Director for this useful presentation. We see and value the efforts of the UNEP staff to deliver on the programme of work and agreed resolutions. From our side, a few comments on the financial situation. Switzerland is concerned that the core contributions to the Environment Fund are 1/3 short with respect to the budget. This is for us an indication that the budget we decided on at UNEA 2 was not sufficiently realistic. This should be taken into account when the preparations for the next budget are starting and also be considered when we take the respective decision at UNEA 4. In light of that current situation, Switzerland wants to highlight 2 points. First, we have repeatedly argued for that the contribution to the Environment Fund should be according to the voluntary scale of contributions. We would strongly encourage countries to support the fund according to this scale. Second, given the budget constraints, we see it as crucial that UNEP must more than ever adhere to its core mandates and play strengths. This means to us particularly focused on evidence-based analysis of the state of the environment. The GEO report, as the flagship report of UNEP, is a good example for it, and as well support the provision of overarching policy guidance and defining responses to address emerging environmental challenges. Mr. Chair, as a concrete step forward, we would suggest that a detailed analysis of the financial situation of the Environment Fund, including the needed adjustments of the budget, is to be presented and to be discussed at the CPR. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Switzerland. And I'm sure Mr. Thiau has some more, ammo in his arsenal to give to us. Mr. Thiau, you have the floor, sir. But before that, I see a request from Japan for the floor. Please go ahead. You have the floor, sir.
Sorry for my late request. And thank you, Mr. Chair, for the floor. And Deputy Executive Director, thank you, Deputy Executive Director, for a comprehensive reporting. I'd like to refer to three things. The first one is on resolution 2/7 on chemicals and waste. We hope UNEP's leadership on the establishment of the after 2020 framework on chemicals and waste. And on waste, I believe it is important area, in particular developing countries. So I understand IETC has an important role on this area. And I have one question. So it is on resolution 2/19 on the Montevideo Program 4. I understand the current program is coming to end, and the next expected next program period beginning in 2020. So I asked the Secretariat for of the current status of preparing next Montevideo program. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Japan. Sri Lanka, you have the floor.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Let me first compliment the Executive Director for his invaluable briefing today and for sharing the challenges that we face. In light of the observations made by the Executive Director about the increasing number of mandates and the reduced contribution to support the increased program workload, it would be helpful for us to have a more fuller report on the activities and programs that UN Environment has supported during the past years, and to provide a matrix of all the member countries that have received any form of UN Environment assistance, with each program identified by its activity and the value of the resources allocated for each country by UN Environment during the past years. We fully understand and appreciate the UN Environment would be providing assistance to member states that request for such assistance, and that it is carried out depending on the priorities and availability of UN Environment resources and the capacity of the member states to implement the initiatives. It would be helpful for member countries to learn about the country-by-country assistance programs and initiatives that have been carried out by UN Environment, so that the applicable and relevant initiatives arising from resolutions adopted by UN Environment that could be helpful to our own countries can be requested from UN Environment, building upon the knowledge and experience and expertise that has developed because of prior mandates and engagements. We would hope that this would be considered, and a country-by-country breakdown of UN Environment initiatives and program supports is detailed out in review report for us to place before our governments to provide a sustained request for increasing funding contribution to UN environment. The scope of work that is required to implement the resolutions adopted at UNIA 1 and UNIA 2 is quite substantial for each member states, and those states that have undertaken to implement those resolutions face their own internal capacity challenges to implement their obligations. This is in this regard that having a comprehensive report is helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Sri Lanka. I now give the floor to Colombia.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you, Chair. Colombia would like to thank UNEP for the positive response provided to the request raised by the President of the Republic, Manuel Santos Calderón, in July 2016, where Colombia requested the support of UNEP in order to develop the environmental aspect of the post-conflict period in Colombia. To date, our entities as a whole have seen the support from UNEP in line with our national priorities identified. We have set out a roadmap and action plan for implementation of the environmental aspects of our peace agreement. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Colombia. I see no further requests for the floor. So I would now give the floor to Mr. Ibrahim Thiaw to react to to the observations or answer the questions that have been raised. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Excellencies, thank you very much for your feedback and for the comments. All feedback is well received and appreciated. Let me try to respond to some questions or maybe comment on some other questions. There have been a lot of focus on the relationships between the UN Environmental Assembly and the high-level political forum, and I think it is an extremely important question. The focus has been so far mostly around the contribution by the President of the Assembly, or the lack thereof, which unfortunately we could not materialize despite multiple efforts by the Secretariat and many member states. This is an issue that we will need to continue to work on with ECOSOC, and you are the parties that are sitting in ECOSOC. And what we have noticed is that while we have great support from you representatives here in Nairobi, the same countries in New York do not necessarily support the fact that the President of the Assembly should speak at the high-level political forum, despite a resolution from the General Assembly. I think we will need to continue to work on this because it gives an opportunity to highlight the work that you are doing, and also it will further enhance the UN Environmental Assembly and the environmental dimension of sustainable development. This is not about the UN Environment Programme Secretariat. It is about the environmental dimension of sustainable development. Mr. Chairman, you may have heard in our presentation today, we actually proposed to the Assembly that they consider working or giving a mandate to the Executive Director to prepare what we call the Sustainability Gap Report. We have some concerns that the environmental dimension of sustainable development is not yet fully reflected in the work done by member states and other agencies, especially referring to the reports that were presented this year at the high-level political forum. So we are concerned that there may be an environmental gap in the way sustainable development is being implemented at the national level and at the regional level. Therefore, maybe similar to the emissions gap report that we do on climate change, we thought that maybe that idea of sustainability gap report may be of interest to you. We will be happy to discuss with the Committee of Permanent Representatives at a later stage. There was a question about the contribution that the UN Environment Programme is making on the UN Development System reform that Secretary General is engaged on. We are indeed engaged into discussions as a member of the Secretariat, and our contributions have been regularly received by the Office of Secretary General, as well as the department in charge of coordination of the UN Development Group. Again, we will continue to work with Secretary General. As you know, his report is expected to be released no later than next week, and we will hope that our contribution has been taken into account, and we know that also that 2018 is the year where this report will now start being prepared for implementation, due for 2019 and beyond. Again, we would like to call on member states to continue to raise the voice of the environment, and you as UN Environmental Assembly, that you raise these points, because our contribution as Secretariat will be heard by our colleagues, but if the comments and the positions are coming from you as member states and you as UN Environmental Assembly, I think you will have a much louder voice. What I've noted is there were multiple questions on budget, and we will be very happy to have a discussion, a session with the CPR on budget matters, including the Environment Fund, the voluntary indicative scale of contributions, as well as the new resource mobilization strategy that the Executive Director has now prepared. We will be very happy to have that conversation, because indeed we feel that there is a gap, and that gap may be due to more a lack of understanding, especially from some countries, including from middle-income countries, than it is actually a real challenge to mobilize this funding. So we will be very happy to explain what our plans are in terms of resource mobilization, and how we would like to work with you, member states, at the regional level as well as at the national level to make that happen. There was a comment on waste and pollution as well as chemicals. This is the theme of your assembly, and we fully agree with Japan that management of waste, not only solid waste, not only electronic waste, but also wastewater, is absolutely essential. And we hope that at the end of your assembly, again, you will give a clear mandate to the Executive Director as to what activities you would like the Secretariat to start developing with you and with other stakeholders. But we agree with Japan that chemicals and waste, beyond 2020, of course, that is the chemicals and waste agenda, but I think as of 2019 is what we would like to see, or 2018 is what we would like to see action on the ground to help the world deal with this particular issue. Developing countries, we have noted in the report from the Executive Director, developing countries are particularly affected by the issue of waste due to lack of capacity by municipal authorities and national authorities to manage their waste. Most of the time it is dumped, most of the time it accumulates, and in some cases it has generated disasters, not only in Africa, not only in Eastern Africa, but also in Asia, but also in West Africa, as we saw in Sierra Leone with the landslides that happened there. So we are now seeing avalanches of solid waste killing people, which is not acceptable at all, especially when you know that actually that waste is actually a resource, if you think about it. So we would like to continue to work with member states to deliver on that. There was a very particular question on the Montevideo issue that I am not in a position to respond to, what the program is for post-2020. I hope my colleague Elizabeth Mrema is in the room. No, she is not. So we'll get back to you with, we'll get back to the delegation for the question related to the Montevideo process, which I am getting some notes, but I'm not prepared to respond to. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Executive Director. This was very helpful. And certainly, I mean, my suggestion would be to continue this conversation, of course, in the intersessional period. We have a finite time at our disposal, but follow-up and regular updates are very important to keep a handle on the way things are shaping up. And I'm sure the regular meetings of the main committee would afford us a good opportunity following UNEA 3. Ladies and gentlemen, we have thus concluded our work for today's plenary session. Thank you very much for your active engagement. We're meeting.
Give me the floor before you.
Okay. So, before I go any further, I would give the floor to the Secretariat. Or would the rapporteur like to take the floor before? Okay. To our rapporteur. Please go ahead, sir.
It's just a technical thing for the East European group. Tomorrow's morning meeting for coordination is cancelled. And why? Because no one came to today's.
Okay. Thank you very much, distinguished Ambassador Tarar, and thank you, distinguished members of the committee. Our only proposal as Secretariat is that we resume our work here in the plenary at 1:45, not 1:30, 1:45 p.m., and you allow us to come back with further explanations to the requests and demands that Member States have made under Agenda Item 8 before we formally close it. And just to recap, we will then proceed to Agenda Item 7, that it is the report of the President of the Assembly on the progress on the ministerial declaration. That's the only announcement that I have. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So we conclude the meeting here. Yes, US, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the Secretariat. Mr. Chair, you've run a very efficient process this morning, and we appreciate that in terms of the work of the plenary. We understand there may be some final follow-up on Agenda Item 8, and we are waiting to hear from the President. We don't anticipate, however, that will necessarily take the entire time that is at our disposal this afternoon, which is from 3:30 to 6:30. We have a great work program in front of us in terms of resolutions that need to be resolved, and while we were first amongst many that called for a clear understanding of the work of the various contact groups, we're wondering whether or not there's any contingency planning that the Secretariat is considering, or that you as the members of the CPR Bureau are considering, that possibly the second and third hours from 14:30 or 1500 until 16:30 might be used to begin some of the work of one of the other contact groups and begin to jumpstart our efforts so that we can, in fact, as we are slated, complete all of the resolutions and agree to them during this OECPR. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. So the Secretariat is still fine-tuning the contingency, and so when we meet in the afternoon, they'll announce that. We'll obviously conclude Agenda Item 7 and the remnant of Agenda Item 8, and then the subsequent announcement will also be made about the plan for tomorrow. I mean, generally speaking, I think we don't have a plenary tomorrow, but we'll get the nitty-gritty in the afternoon session. So see you all back at 1:45, but before that, I have a request for the floor from Mexico. Please go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just hearing that there have been requests which could lead us to have 3 parallel meetings at the same time. If we don't have an agreement on this, to have so many meetings in session at the same time, I don't think this should go ahead. We really need to have prior notice of this, if this would happen, because we need to be able to negotiate as much as possible. Unfortunately, this was not negotiated. Therefore, we would have to really discuss this issue, and therefore I would request that we don't take a decision on this at the present moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mexico. And I would like to assure you that whatever suggestion is tabled will be without prejudice to the overall broad agreement that we had of not having unmanageable number of parallel meetings. So rest assured, there will be no surprises that will be sprung on any delegation. And definitely, while we would like to be as efficient as possible, we also have to keep everyone on board and, keep the limitations of individual delegations in view. But thank you. This is a very valuable point that you've raised. I do not see any request for the floor. So with your indulgence, we conclude the meeting, this present meeting, to meet again at 1:45.